मेरा तो डिस्कनेक्ट हो गया और भाई
मैं माइक कनेक्ट
Can you hear me? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. We begin with the name of Allah Almighty, the most merciful. KP Board of Investment and Trade welcomes you all to this webinar on investment opportunities for Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in a post-COVID scenario. This is the inaugural webinar of the series meant to attract investment and help identify the bottlenecks. We have a very high level and future focused conversation session lined up for you. But before getting started, just a few things to share with you all. I would request everyone to keep their microphones off when they are not speaking to ensure good audio quality for everyone. And we encourage the speakers to switch on their cameras, especially when you're speaking, if your network allows you to do so conveniently without any disruptions. The participants are requested to kindly keep their cameras off. The session will also be telecasted live on KP-BOIT's official Facebook page, and it will be recorded too, and the video will be posted on our YouTube and website. We encourage you to revisit the session later and feel free to share it with your network. We also invite questions from you at the end or as the session goes on. Please feel free to write them in the chat box at the right side of the screens. Please have the chat box open in the window for your convenience. Now, keeping in view the time constraint, every speaker will have 5 to 7 minutes slot to speak. The session will be moderated by Mr. Hassan Daoud, CEO, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Board of Investment and Trade. The sequence of the session for speakers will be the starting remarks will be given by Mr. Taimur Khan Jhagra, who is our keynote speaker. Then we'll be joined by Mr. Charles from World Bank Group. Then Mr. Amir Latif Saab, Secretary Industries. Then Mr. Hassan Khabar, a private sector consultant and a journalist. Then Mr. Sajid Aslam, Head of ACCA Pakistan. Then we'll be joined by Dr. Waqar Ahmed, Joint Executive Director, SDPI. After that, Mr. Kaisar Khan will join us, Vice President, FPCCI. Mr. Simon Lee will join us from CRBC, and Mr. LV also from CRBC. And lastly, we'll be joined by Mr. Ali Mahmood, Chief Strategy and Information Officer from KP Economic Zone. So to begin with the proceedings, I'll hand over it to Mr. Hassan Daud, our moderator, so the proceedings may begin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amara. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First of all, let me thank each one of you, but especially the speakers, for taking their time out. I know each one of you has a great task and you all are busy in your day-to-day routine, but on our request and on my personal request, you have all agreed to participate in this series of webinar. This is an inaugural session. We have planned 4 such sessions, and in each session, we would like to invite experts, think tanks, political leaders, business leaders, and as well as government officials. And this webinar is just like to be a quadruple helix model where each one of us need to contribute, give their input. Before I invite our worthy keynote speaker, Mr. Taimur Khan Jagla, I would just like to apprise each one of you that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is gearing itself for attracting investment from across the globe. We have actually crafted our industrial policy and set of other strategies, which in consultation with business leaders, academia, and all the concerned stakeholders. And we would like to take this opportunity of today's webinars and the ones that are following to actually consolidate and prepare ourselves well in a post-COVID scenario. I personally believe, and this is based on not just my literature review, but also based on my interaction with some of the key investors across the globe and some investment groups, that there is a relocation of industry lined up, not just because of COVID-19, but also because of perhaps the US-China trade war. So we on part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa would actually contribute based on the directions given to us by our Chief Minister, our Finance Minister, and our Minister for Industries to actually be a part of that enabling environment which can actually create that pull factor for attracting investment. We have Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as you all know, is blessed with natural resources. We have immensely talented and hardworking human resource. And with this together, actually, we think that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is there to be the industrial hub of Pakistan and contribute to the economic growth of our great country. I am also happy that through this webinar series, I will be able to interact and discuss some of the key constraints and bottlenecks in the industrial development, in ease of doing business, in business and trade activities, especially for SME sector development. I can see Mr. Adnan also here. So I think this and in the subsequent webinar series, we shall be able to bring in a policy paper which we will present to the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in terms of some of the measures to be taken by our government. I again would like to thank each one of you, all my friends, colleagues, my partners, and also all those who are interested in the industrial development of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We have been part of the historical Silk Route where traders used to come from Central Asian Republic and through Afghanistan coming to Khyber Pass and doing business across the region. And this perhaps is now the time that we become that important crossroad where the trade and business activities could flourish. We want to expand our business with Afghanistan, and I also see some friends from Afghanistan in play. Right now we have about 65 participants, and hopefully this number will grow. This session is also going on live on Facebook Live and some other source also. And I would request that each one of you can, if you have a query, and also those who are attending this session could send it in the chat box so that we will highlight those in front of again a request that should be highlighting which speaker do you want to answer. We of course are constrained by time, but what we will do is that after each speaker we will give one or two questions Q&A, and then immediately go to the next speaker, and then we will have a Q&A session in which I will also be participating. I am happy to report that our worthy finance minister and our health minister, despite all his busy activities, especially to combat COVID-19, is here. We shall request him to give us his vision about investment and how Khyber Pakhtunkhwa would become the industrial hub and trading hub for not just this part of the world, but also across the world. So without further ado, first of all, let me thank Mr. Taimur Jagra, who's a champion of ease of doing business, and under his direction and guidance, we have been able to craft certain strategies and policies to facilitate the business environment and create that enabling environment. So, sir, the floor is yours, sir.
Assalamu alaikum ji, and thank you for having me on. It's an honor, and I try and speak to the business community and people in adjacent agencies because I think it's important to give the right messages. मैं दो तीन चीजें जो है वो कहूँगा just for shortage of time, but the first one is, as always, I think let's recognize the fact that we are across Pakistan very far from having an ideal business environment. Not just far, but very far from having an ideal business environment. Or us lihaz se, in fact, we were having a discussion with the Chief Minister yesterday about making sure that we pick up the fruits of the incentives that the Prime Minister has offered to the construction industry. And I made the point that ultimately it is not the incentives that will actually just get developers to come in, but the experience with which they actually are able to or otherwise, bring in their money over here, because things like approval processes and paperwork take so long that the fees, etc., that you have to pay tend to become very secondary. So I think perhaps the biggest thing that I say in terms of improving the business environment is the recognition that there is a long, long way to go in terms of improving that. Having said that, I think I'd like to commend specifically Hassan Dawood, who's come in as the chairman of our board of investment and has done some commendable work. And I think would have done even better work if COVID hadn't come in the middle. So we also should recognize that the whole COVID situation makes it even harder to provide the right investment climate. a few steps that we have done. We are in process of putting in place a revised industrial policy. That reminds me, and Hassan, you can tell me separately, jo pichle industrial policy ke against jo incentives the about 6 or 9 months ago, we said that we would make the payments, although I didn't even agree completely with the incentives, but in terms of the credibility of government, we agreed that the right thing was to make the payments to whomsoever they were due. And I'd just like you to separately brief me whether that has been done or not, because we made the money available. We now putting in place a new industrial policy, and I would certainly urge anyone who wants to review it and give input on it, Hassan se wo kare, and you should be able to give your input if you haven't. I know they have already engaged extensively with that. I see a couple of colleagues, I believe, from the World Bank. I would request you, because we called you in, to look at this draft paper and give me some feedback. There is some feedback that I personally pointed out. So I just want to make sure that I take advantage of this opportunity. One of the things that we'd asked, that I'd asked the department and the Board of Investment to do when I got the draft of the policy, because it had been, the draft policy had been crafted pre-COVID. And so I said, let's make sure that we apply a COVID lens to this, because the world has changed. So I look forward to seeing the next draft of that. I think there are things we are doing at a flagship level, such as the Rashakai Special Economic Zone. And I'm a big believer in the fact that ultimately, that if we are going to give a better sort of investment or investment platform to industry, then these special zones have to be the way to go, because we have so many infrastructural issues that solving them across the length and breadth of the country is important. So this is something that has taken off. We got the approval from the Board of Approvals. We will be hopefully soon carrying out the groundbreaking. The process for approval has proven to me how challenging doing something like this is, because there's multiple layered processes at the provincial level, and then there are multiple processes and engagements at the federal level. And providing the infrastructure that we need to, in this case, requires not just the provincial and the federal governments, but also entities such as PESCO, the Sui Northern Gas Company, etc., etc. So there is actually a genuine big need, and I hope that effectively the Board of Investment will be able to play this role of a glue and of a catalyst and of a debottlenecker whenever these situations arrive. But for me, the KPI in terms of how we actually really see the fruit of a more investment-friendly government is that in the future, the sort of approvals that has, the sort of time for approval that the Rashakai zone has taken, we should be looking to halve these and then halve these again. And those are the sort of milestones that we ought to set ourselves. We have taken small confidence building measures. We did not only map specific regulations where we've eliminated, my cheat sheet says 68 various regulations such as licenses, permits, NOCs, etc., that we're in the process of deregulating. But more so, we have cut local taxes on 200 categories of SMEs. And if you look at our budget document, we actually tried to go as far as possible in this year's budget to try and simplify the tax burden. And I think that although the size of our economy is small, if you look at the scope and the sort of I don't want to use the word wisdom, but the foresight with which we crafted some of the tax breaks that we put in, right? We've tried to do them not just to ease the burden on the businessman or the consumer, but we've also tried to do them to try and eliminate duplication and eliminate rent seeking. So for example, a bunch of taxes such as bed tax, such as professional tax on 18 categories of professionals, such as the entertainment tax, we've just taken these things away or eliminated double taxation because we see that the quantum of revenue that they bring in is relatively low, but the potential for rent seeking that they bring in or just the burden that they add to businesses is high. And I believe we can go much, much further while continuing to need to attain the objective of increasing government revenues. Because what is also a fact is that our tax to GDP countrywide is now actually less than 10% or at around 10%, and that is nowhere near the sort of money that is required to run this state. And so attaining this dual objective of being able to increase revenue collection while getting rid of the complexity and absurdity of taxation that we have in this country is a complex issue, but one we're determined to do. I can tell you myself, I moved from abroad 2 years ago, and I moved from Dubai, so I was living in a tax-free zone. Despite that, filling in my last returns, I actually didn't need to declare any tax. Took me weeks to try and understand how to fill in a return. Obviously, I was trying to do it the right way and declare all my foreign income and so on, so forth, but took me weeks because it was such a complex and gray sort of area and frankly not even fit for purpose. So I think there is tons that we can do over there. I think the other thing that we do need to do over here that we determined to do as part of our efforts and where I'd encourage your feedback is in addition to the thrust on an investment policy and an industrial policy that works is 2 or 3 thrusts. One on the newly merged districts where I believe we have a national responsibility. One on SMEs and cottage businesses because the bulk of our economy and in particular important in these times of pandemic. And a third one on women, right? We are very keen and very willing to look at that as well. I think that there's a bunch of other things that we can do. Hassan tells me we're also working on a trade and commerce strategy. But rather than speak more, I would like to just end my comments over here and leave perhaps time for 1 or 2 questions or comments or feedback. With one last thought to put in your head, and that thought not just for people from the general public over here, but also for those who I see, and I see a bunch of faces from the wider development sector, is that the bottleneck in terms of doing more faster, for us, I've always found is the critical mass of capacity available to government. And here I would say that to an extent, the assistance that we get from the development community has generally not been part of the solution. Because if improving the investment climate is about being friendlier to the private sector or being less bureaucratic, then I often find that we struggle with one bureaucracy within government and another bureaucracy that advises us from the development sector, with due apology to everyone who's there from the bank, from the UN, from DFID, from anywhere else. And that is a challenge that we have to fix, because ultimately, the more dynamic capacity that we have in government, the more we'll actually be able to do in terms of eliminating red tape at a faster speed. And in that, as long as we don't have the critical mass of people that is actually able to contribute, a lone voice, even of a minister of finance, will not be enough, or even of 5 or 10 ministers, or even of a prime minister won't be enough, because you're basically trying to change a system. And to change a system, you need to still work through the system. You need to change rules. You need to change rules. You need to go through approval of processes. To do that, you need to convince people who are trained in a certain way. And all of that will only happen when there is a critical mass of voices that is actually giving input that is smart enough and actually following up on that. So that's a final thought that I would like to leave you with. If you're asking yourself the question of why this sort of change doesn't happen quicker in Pakistan, or why good policy doesn't translate itself either to the right implementation or the right results in this country. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much for lending me an ear. And I don't know how we moderate this, but if there is 1 or 2 questions, or if you want to send your questions to Hassan on WhatsApp, perhaps he can ask me a question.
So we have, thank you very much, sir. We have about 2 questions right now, and as I would just like to highlight that we would have about 4 such webinars, initially at a general level, and then specifically for certain sectors, including tourism. Sir, I have a question from Mr. Murtaza to yourself, sir, and he states that if tax to GDP ratio is getting low, then how would government benefit from any potential investment in the form of tax revenue collection? This question is from Mr. Murtaza to yourself.
I'm not sure I fully get the question. If tax to GDP is low, then what? Sorry?
Then how would government benefit from any potential investment in the form of tax revenue collection? So perhaps this question is in a way that if your collection goes down, how would you contribute towards investment, especially in infrastructure development?
Look, so a little bit, and I'll also try and reframe the question in a slightly different way, which is something that I did get asked in the budget, although you don't get asked this enough, is that if tax to GDP is so low, or if we actually have a revenue shortfall, then how come we're actually giving more and more tax breaks, right? And I think there are 2 or 3 facets to how I think about this. Number 1, indeed, there is a contradiction over here, right? But the challenge that we face as a country is that we don't just have a single problem to fix. We don't just have a revenue problem to fix, because if there was just a revenue problem to fix, then the right person would come in and say, I'll take the hit and I'll just increase taxation. I don't think it's that simple. I do think that there are a couple of things. There is a large volume of people in this country across the social divide that doesn't pay reasonable taxes. And also, I think what is true is that this is a country where through multiple means, including means such as, if you like, investing in keeping the rupee-dollar parity low, as happened in the last reign, that we all, regardless of where we come from, enjoy a certain subsidy from the government, right? That is true in the power sector, that is true in a number, that is true on subsidies like flour pay di jati hai. So I think we do need to recognize that in this country, we actually all enjoy a slightly inflated income because of either the government subsidizing certain costs or because of the government turning a blind eye to a certain portion of the grey economy that perhaps should be less grey. And so let's recognize that to say that we then do owe a debt to try and fix this collectively. So part of the answer is indeed to try and look at how we can ensure that we pay a fair contribution. The other thing, though, is that if we don't have enough investment in the economy, then then your tax to GDP is not going to be your only issue. You actually need to grow the size of your economy. You need to create more jobs. You need to create more economic activity. And to do that, you need to know where to give the right sort of tax breaks, right? So that you facilitate investment, which facilitates job creation in the right area. And I think there are good ways of doing this. And then there's a process of thinking through how we can do it even better. So I'll give you an example of that as well. So for example, we recently signed our first ever wheeling agreement where after which we held an auctioning process, and there are certain industries that benefit from a lower rate of power charges that because of federal provincial government collaboration, they're able to access because they have access to provincially generated electricity through provincial projects at rates that don't have to be in line with the WAPDA rates. Now, I think it's a fantastic way through. It creates additional provincial revenue. It creates the opportunity for industry to tap into cheaper electricity and makes KP more competitive. However, I would reflect on what was done and perhaps try and do it even better by saying the right way to do this in the future is not to offer this to existing industry, but to offer it to new players who are coming in the market, right? Because otherwise all you've done is someone who's made an existing investment can now access, you've given him a little bit of their bottom line, and I think that's fine. So I think that there's a second example of how, both offering incentives is important, but how we should think about those incentives translating to the right benefits for government, including in terms of revenue generation. And obviously the theory is if you create jobs, if there's economic activity, even if you give certain amount of tax breaks, those you should be able to offset that through revenue generation elsewhere, right? People will earn more, they will spend more. If they spend more, you will then get more revenue through GST, through income tax, through other sectors that are indirectly impacted. And I'll give you a last example on this. When we worked last year to open the Torkham border 24/7, I found a lot of resistance amongst the federal bureaucracy to pay the 100-odd million rupees. Think of 100 million rupees as not even $1 million. And 100 million rupees were roughly needed to make the place operational 24/7. And in the end, we offered to the federal government that we'll pay this because we believe that the economic benefits of 24/7 trade will be huge. And in 3 months, we were able to prove that the additional export potential was about between $200 million and $500 million a month, a year. We have about $1 billion in terms of trade with Afghanistan. And I forget the date, but I think between 10 and 20 billion rupees in terms of additional tax collection on imports. And so that is the impact, in this case, of 100 million rupees of investment in the right place. Of course, then COVID hit that. And so we're not operating in the same world anymore. But I think it is incredibly important that we see the connectivity of our decisions over here, and then certainly simulate intended and unintended consequences. Second and last question, Hassan. I hope that answers the question to you.
I would club two questions that, quite pertinent ones. And actually, the first one is that as being the health minister and finance minister also, how far do you see that this current COVID situation would last? And how would it largely impact KP in Pakistan in general and KP in particular? And what would be the future of government employees? And Ms. Ayla Majid has asked that what are the key high priority investment sectors in your reckoning for KPR?
Okay. The COVID situation will last. I've been told, I was looking at the screen, so I have a message which says, sir, try to view the camera. So I'll view the camera. I hope you guys can see my eyes now. So the COVID situation will last a while. And with the COVID situation lasting, I think the impact will not be insignificant. It will be pretty significant the world over. And it will be pretty significant in Pakistan. If you do the math, I won't take the federal government collection figure of 4.9 trillion. If you do the math at the 17% growth rate that FBR was displaying, FBR would have collected about 4.5, 4.6 trillion rupees. And their collection went to less than 4 trillion. So just the impact of 3 months in terms of government revenue was about 600 billion rupees, or about 200 million a month, 200 billion a month. And so if you take that over a year, at that rate, that would be 2.4 trillion rupees. If you halve that to say that, we will still be working in challenging times, but, we've seen the worst of the economic impact, that is still downward revenue pressure of 1 trillion rupees in what tends to be a 4 to 5 trillion collection window. And even if you have that again, that a 500 billion rupee impact is still huge, both for the center and for the provinces, because that deficit needs to be made up for the government. So what that would mean is that you start this year actually really collecting only between 3 and 3.5 trillion, and your growth will only get you back to the 4 trillion. And then you ideally want to collect another trillion so that you have roughly 5 trillion to be able to spend in terms of both government and development spending, right? And so I think it's an incredibly difficult task. Now, coupled to this, the fact that what COVID has done is reduce international travel and trade. And that will also be the case. And you've seen the sort of, I think everyone now expects global GDP to reduce between 3 and 10%. And these forecasts change every month, every other month, depending on which way the situation goes. So I think the good news is that it feels like the virulence of the virus is getting less intense, right? And I think that is good news and should allow us to step towards a slightly more normal life as we knew it. However, the bad news is that the infectivity isn't going down. And the daily infection rates globally at about 150, 160,000 plus people is greater than it ever was, right? And so what is very clear is that we need to live with the virus. And if we need to live with the virus, we really need to see what this new normal looks like. But that new normal will have a significant economic impact. And if we're going to deal with it well, then we need to recognize that, change our narrative, change our behavior, not just government and opposition, but business and civil society as well, right? And in that, I think the most incredibly luckiest people are those serving in government, because they're the only people who have job security. Right? They're literally the only people in the world who have job security, followed perhaps by anyone working in the development sector, because this is a time where they can say that they're working in government, but right. And with that in mind, the one thing that I firmly believe in, but the extent to which that we can do it will really depend on the amount of pressure that business and civil society puts on, because ours is not a culture where we look at. So let me tell you the following. No one in government will be fired, because that is not how government works. And I think so that job security is something that people can take for granted. And I think that's a good thing, right? It comes with its challenges, but that is something that, right, we should not be shy to say. However, having put that stake on the ground, and we had a lot of discussions in terms of increasing government salaries or so, and I'll tell you my perspective on that again and again is, right, I cannot justify increasing salaries for 1% of the population and 8% of the labor force when the other 92% has its jobs at risk, and I need to maximize my investment in the economy to be able to make the wheels of the economy run and to be able to minimize job losses in the general economy, right? That is a trade-off that I need to make. And the third thing that I need to do with that is to really challenge the cost of government. And by that, I mean the escalation in the cost of government and the structural flaws in the cost of government, right? That for me is the one thing that is incredibly important, where I just don't see, I will see a challenge on कि आपने government employees की तनख्वाहें क्यों नहीं बढ़ाई? But no one ever asks the question. I saw Hassan Khyber write a very good article on pensions recently. No one ever says, why are pensions unfunded in this country, and what is government doing about it? And by the way, what is incredibly important is the very civil servants who actually need to draw from the government's kitty and whose own future pensions may be at risk, and so who you would imagine have the greatest incentive to reform the pension system, are happy to leave this perhaps difficult but incredibly necessary reform to tomorrow, right? Because it is just a complex one. And that is what perhaps keeps me awake at night more than anything else, is asking myself the question that at a time like this, are we able to push the speed of reform fast enough and hard enough or not, right? And that is something that even as political leaders, we cannot do alone, because whether you have to privatize, whether you have to innovate, whether you have to, do things that may be misconstrued as being politically unpopular, we can only do it if the right pressure is raised, right? And that pressure, I am surprised, is not raised by the business community, is not raised by the media, is not raised by the development community, beyond sort of the usual lip service and seminars. Which means that if I want to move at 100 kilometers per hour, I can only move at 40 or 50 kilometers per hour, because the environment for it needs to be right for me to be able to work on it bolder, harder, faster, right? So in short, because I think this was an incredibly important question, right? I don't think that Pakistan will get out of financial crisis ultimately unless we rethink the future cost of government. And that is important, because otherwise we will always be talking about NFCs and giving more from the province to the center, more from the center to the province. I will ask for my net tidal profits. Balochistan will say we'll poor. Karachi will say we contribute. Punjab will say we contribute. But the fact of the matter is, we're fighting over a pie that isn't big enough, and we spend most of that pie in a way that is unsustainable. And we cannot expect to say that we should aim for and move towards 6%, 7%, 8% GDP growth without really challenging some of the fundamental elements of inertia in government that we have traditionally said are immovable, but that have to be movable if we are to move forward. And that's an area where I need support from across the spectrum to be able to move beyond the pace that I'm moving. I hope that answers the question, Asmi.
Sir, because of the paucity of time and since you're engaged with combating COVID, I would answer later. I'll ask question on the priority area, but I cannot thank you enough, sir, for your deep insight, and that gives us food for thought for each one of us to think, and we'll deliberate it further. Sir, we have eminent speakers like Sajid, Hassan, Khyber, Charles, Mr. Adil, and Ali, and so we would consolidate our report and would submit those recommendations to you, sir, for your perusal, and then we can take action. One of the important recommendation that has come up, a lot of questions on that is, and it's a form of request for you while you undertake the reforms work, sir, is to improve the processes that are there, because for business enterprises, the time taken for registering, even SPV that we were registering today with SECP for Rashakai, that's almost 2 days of extensive work. But we would request yourself, sir, honestly, that if you could look at that, not just at KP level, but at a federal level.
Okay, Ji. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to engaging with you whenever you like us. Always will have.
Thank you so
much. Keep on doing the good work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
With this, without further ado, I would now request Mr. Khyber. And there's a small change in the sequence because Mr. Khyber has been summoned at the Prime Minister's office for an important policy meeting. So Mr. Khyber would speak on behalf of FPCCI. He's a young business leader, recently elected as the Vice President of FPCCI at Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. He has led the business processes, and he would be speaking in Urdu. So for those of you who do not understand Urdu, I would translate when I get the opportunity in between. So Mr. Khyber, kindly, the floor is yours, sir.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम. थैंक यू वेरी मच भट्ट साहब, और आज मौका देने का इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे मैं ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ द फेडरेशन ऑफ पाकिस्तान चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स एंड इंडस्ट्री एज अ वाइस प्रेसिडेंट KPK एंड द जनरल असेंबली मेंबर फॉर द सार्क CCI. सो मैं अभी बात करूंगा जो कि कोविड के बाद जो चूँकि टारगेट जो डिस्कशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू हमारा है वो बेसिकली है कि कोविड के बाद क्या अपॉर्चुनिटी है इन KPK. बुनियादी तौर पे अगर हम इस वक्त देख लें तो ग्लोबल विलेज में हम हैं, तो अगर ग्लोबल विलेज में हम कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स को देख लें, पहले वहाँ से आ जाते हैं, या जो हमारी GDP या जो हमारा बजट था, तो तकरीबन जो वर्ल्ड बैंक होते तो $93 ट्रिलियन था. $93 ट्रिलियन पूरी वर्ल्ड की हमारी बजट थी. उसके बाद कोविड के बाद 10% दैट इज कंफर्म बाय द IMF एंड वर्ल्ड बैंक कि 10% इसमें कमी आई है. तो अगर उस 10% कमी के बाद तो हर मुल्क का जो बजट होगा वो 10% बजट डेफिसिट होगा 10% के हवाले से. आए सेनेटर साहब राजी जी प्लीज. अच्छा, दूसरी बात ये है कि इसमें अगर हम दूसरी बातें कर रहे कि फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट की बात कर लेते हैं FDI की, तो इस वक्त इस बजट में जो 2021 का था, उन्होंने कहा कि इसमें FDI पे भी टैक्स हाई होगा। तो अगर हम रीजन में टैक्स की बात कर लें तो इस वक्त जो कॉरपोरेट टैक्स है बेसिकली पाकिस्तान में वो 29% है, ठीक है, लेकिन हकीकत में ये 54% है, 54% है। कैसे हैं जी? WWF 2% 29 के अलावा, फिर उसके अलावा WWP वो 5%, फिर सुपर टैक्स फिर 3%, तो 29 + 10 अगर हम कर लेते हैं तो ये बन जाते 39%। और जिस इन्वेस्टर ने पैसा डाला होता है, जब वो डिविडेंड के शक्ल में वो पैसा निकालता है तो उस वक्त 15% उससे फिर विड्रॉल पे जो है ना वो चार्ज किया जाता है। तो जब इसको आप कंप्लीट करें तो 54%। लिहाजा रीजन में क्या है, इंडिया में इस वक्त जो कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स है वो जो है जनाब 20%। दूसरे इसके अलावा SME पे उनका जो कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स है वो है 15%। तो इनको मद्देनजर रखते हुए, और चूंकि मैं इसके अलावा अपॉर्चुनिटी इन KPK अगर बात हो तो KPK में देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ पोटेंशियल, मतलब इस माइन मिनरल सबसे बेहतरीन अपॉर्चुनिटी है KPK में, हम उसको कैश कर सकते हैं, हम टूरिज्म में कर सकते हैं, हम एनर्जी साइड पे, हाइडल साइड पे हम बेपनाह अपॉर्चुनिटी ले सकते हैं, उसमें इन्वेस्टमेंट कर सकते हैं, फूड के प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट लगाए जा सकते हैं, उसमें हम बीइंग ए फेडरेशन हम आपके साथ है, जिस किस्म की जिस टाइप की इंडस्ट्री और इन्वेस्टमेंट कहते हैं हम आने के लिए तैयार है। लेकिन क्या KPK में इंडस्ट्रियल जोन है? नंबर 1, हर रीजन में डिस्ट्रिक्ट वाइज जो हम बताते रहते हैं स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन और सारी चीज हम कहते हैं, क्या हमारे लिए अगर वो हो तो क्या उसकी कीमत वायबल है? मैंने जो रशिया का स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन का प्राइस है वो डॉलर्स में है, वो इतना महंगा है, पहले तो ग्राउंड पे कुछ है नहीं। तो मेरी रिक्वेस्ट इसमें यह है कि आप जब टैक्स इम्यूनिटी नहीं देंगे लोगों को, यहाँ पे जब लोगों को टैक्स कोई मतलब ऐसी इंप्रेशन नहीं देंगे तो KPK में लोग इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए ऐसे नहीं आएंगे। नंबर 2 बात है, जो हमारे पास माइन मिनरल्स है, उस माइन मिनरल्स में अगर हम जहां से एक्सप्लोरेशन होती हो वहीं पे हम उनको प्रोसेसिंग प्लांट लगा दी जाए, रॉ शक्ल में ले जाने की बजाय वहां से उनको हम लें और एंड कंज्यूमर पे मार्केट में हम इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में उनको दे दें। और उसमें बीइंग खैबर बैंक ऑफ खैबर, चूंकि फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर बैठे हुए हैं, मैं उनको रिक्वेस्ट कर दूंगा कि मतलब और बैंक्स को तो छोड़ दे, खैबर बैंक के लिए बहुत लाजिम और मलजूम है कि जो हमारी यूथ है उस ट्राइबल एरियाज में बेपनाह काबिल लड़के हैं, उनको ट्रेनिंग दी जाए थ्रू स्मेडा और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, हम देने के लिए तैयार हैं। लेकिन हम अगर उनको लीजिंग पे प्लांट एंड मशीनरी दे, वहां पे लोन नहीं मिलते, फैसिलिटेशन नहीं होती, बैंक्स उसी तरीके से इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं करती, तो इन चीजों पे मेरी रिक्वेस्ट है बीइंग ए फेडरेशन एज अ वाइस प्रेसिडेंट कि आप लोगों को इंटरेस्ट ऐसे ही डेवलप होगा कि आप उन लोगों को कुछ अपॉर्चुनिटी दें, आप लोगों को कोई ऐसी एक्सप्रेशन दें। तो इंशाअल्लाह ताला, मुझे नॉर्थ वजीरिस्तान कहते हैं, अगर आप फाटा कहते हैं, अगर आप पाटा कहते हैं, मैं मिसाल दूंगा गदूना मजई का। गदूना मजई में आपने इम्यूनिटी दी, दुनिया लोग के लोग आ गए, लेकिन जैसे आपने ली तो लोग चले गए। फाटा पाटा में इसी गवर्नमेंट ने बड़ी माजरत के साथ आपने एक स्पेशल SRO दिया, लेकिन 8 महीने बाद उन लोगों से आपने वो टैक्स विड्रॉ किए। तो लिहाजा मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि आप पॉलिसी बुनियादी तौर पे इतनी पक्की बना ले कि अगर आप इन्वेस्टर्स को लाते तो पहले इन्वेस्टर को टैक्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से आप उसको सिक्योर करें। अगर आप माइन मिनरल्स की बात करते हैं, पहले तो कौम एग्री नहीं होता, जो वहाँ के लोकल ट्राइब है, हम पहले उनको कन्विंस कर लेते हैं, जैसे वो कन्विंस हो जाता है तो जैसे वो माल तैयार होता है तो दूसरा कौम रास्ते में आ जाता है कि भाई मुझे भी आप कुछ दोगे, हम उनको भी कन्विंस कर लेते हैं। जैसे वो नीचे आ जाता है तो फिर जो है ना, जो फाटा सेक्रेटेरिएट है पुराना जमाने वाला, वो अभी GST भी 17% लग गई, तो बंदे को वो चीज़ वायबल ही नहीं लेती। लिहाजा ये गवर्नमेंट का काम है कि गवर्नमेंट उनको फैसिलिटेट करे, गवर्नमेंट एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिवली उनको इतना मजबूत बना ले जो इन्वेस्टर आ रहा हो ताकि वो सुकून से हो, वो काम करें, और हमें बहुत बेपनाह अपॉर्चुनिटी है, इसमें कोई शक नहीं है। थैंक यू वेरी मच भट्ट साहब, मैं शॉर्ट टाइम लूंगा क्योंकि काफ़ी स्पीकर्स भी हैं, मैं अपनी बात को इख्तिमाम करता हूँ। जज़ाकल्लाह जी, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you very much. I would just summarize what you have said, and these were very key recommendations. First of all, we need to look at our incentive packages and also review the tax and maybe perhaps fasten up the tax reform processes. He has also given recommendation that we can work on several sectors, but we need to build our capacity to undertake investment in terms of the new technologies and embrace those within our FTAs and other vocational centers. With this, I also would like to urge my colleagues from donor agencies, UNDP, World Bank, IFC, and perhaps Hassan, who's working for DFID in the seed project. Also, when you interact with the government and private sector individuals at KP, you must also have perhaps some input from Pakistan Business Council and also FPCCI, so that when we can measure the deliverables, perhaps we can achieve our targets further. But without further ado, I would now request my friend who is now in Dubai, enjoying the luxuries of the United Emirates, and perhaps keen to get back to Pakistan ASAP and contribute in the development of so Charles, I would just request you that when you speak on the investment potential that Pakistan has, because you have great insight since your first ever visit to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, perhaps in 2017. Also highlight some of the steps that each one of us, including the representatives of chambers, academia, myself representing the government, and think tanks who are actively working with KP, like ACCA, like Hassan in seed, and we would request you to give us your deliverables where we can achieve fast results. So over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Hassan Saab. I hope you can hear me fine, and I'd like to give my respects to the minister as well, Timer Saab. We had a good meeting to initiate the work together with KP Province last year. Actually, it was in early 2019, and since that time we've been very pleased to be working together with you, Hassan Saab, and the KP Board of Investment and Trade to develop an investment promotion strategy. And part of an investment promotion strategy is to look at what your endowments are, what you have that's attractive to investors. And I think KP Province has a lot. Earlier, some people mentioned tourism. Of course, tourism has been hit very hard by COVID-19, but I think that's now, that's not forever. And I know myself, having visited certain sites, more of the historical sites like Taxila, the temples that are in the KP part of Taxila, that there's certainly a lot there, and it's convenient, it's not far. It could be easily accessible by tourists. I saw signs there that were in Thai language. Obviously, Thai pilgrims used to come quite often to see these sites along the Buddhist circuit, and I think they will be back, in the future. But the trick here is that things need to be promoted. And as we made our first visits to KP Province, this is pre-COVID, we were talking about all the good things that were happening, and I don't think we should lose sight of that, right? That the security situation has been improving, right? The connectivity situation has been improving. We heard today about the Rashakai SEZ. I mean, I've driven by, it's on the highway, I've driven by and seen how that could be a very convenient location for not just for production, but also access to markets, because it's not far from Islamabad, it's not far from Lahore, and it's on major thoroughfare. So there was a lot of talk about the possibilities for natural resource investment, but also we see investments in food processing and in other areas. So I think we should, not forget that discussion that we had about what attributes there are in KP. And yes, times are tough right now, but we will get through this. And I'll talk at the end a little bit about some strategies for dealing with COVID-19. But against that backdrop, I just would like to say, as an employee of the IFC, International Finance Corporation, IFC is an investor, right? And we provide advice on private sector development. Now, as an investor in the private sector, so when IFC, even though we're part of the World Bank Group, when we make an investment, it's with a private firm. There's no government guarantee behind that. So we invest at our own risk. And if we lose on that, it goes on our own balance sheet, and the government does not step in to bail out that investment. We take the loss. So obviously we work very commercially, but at the same time, we just finished our fiscal year, and the day before yesterday, and we had a very good year for investment. And we did combine with partners, which we call mobilization. We invested more than $500 million in private sector in the country, in Pakistan. And areas that we saw growth, of course, were infrastructure. We did some big projects in wind power, which I believe KP has potential in that, although these investments were not in KP. We did investments in the agribusiness. We're looking at, and I noticed one of the questions that came in the chat room was about e-commerce and around, fintech, and we did an investment in a fund that's supporting these type of entrepreneurship funds. So we're looking forward, and looking at where the growth potential is. And as part of the work we've done with the Federal Board of Investment, we took a very close look at sectors with high potential for investment, particularly FDI, in the country. And there are many, and particularly in manufacturing, but we also came up with the IT sector. And as I think many of you know, IT sector is contributing as much to exports probably as any other sector outside of textiles, although not all of it is recorded as FDI, or sorry, as FDI or export. A great deal is happening. So, it's important to remember that I know a lot of the discussion talked about revenues prior to this, but I think we have to think about investment also's impact on jobs, exports, foreign exchange reserves, and on local procurement, because when a particularly foreign investor comes in, they'll be procuring very many items and services from the local SMEs. So, and they'll be pushing those SMEs to produce at quality levels that they demand, and that will raise the capacity of the local business community to service these investors. So, and when we look at Pakistan as a whole, the kind of attributes, who are the types of investors that come to the country, so far we've seen that around 85% of investment is in FDI, is for what we call market-seeking investment. That means investors who invest in the country in order to sell their products locally, to take advantage of the very large market size. Pakistan just moved up to number 4, right, in global population, I think, just past Russia. So it's a huge market, and incomes have been increasing over the long term. So it's very attractive. What can we do to attract the other type of investor that we refer to as efficiency seeking? Those are investors that invest in a country because there's a great opportunity to use it not just for local markets, but for export markets. That's mainly been in the textile sector so far, but that has not been as attractive. So we have to look at, what are the attributes or what are the strengths. Last week, and you can find this report, it's called the Global Investment Competitiveness Report on the World Bank website. This is a World Bank report, was launched last week. And it talked about, trends, I guess, long-term and high-level trends in investment. And one of the, I guess, issues that came out of that is that pre-COVID, FDI is globally, as a percentage of GDP, is declining, has been declining. This is a long-term trend. I think nobody's surprised by that because we see a lot of these trade frictions, and that often leads to reductions in FDI. So what we were used to was regularly 3 to 4% FDI as a percentage of GDP globally, even 4 or 5 years ago. Now we're looking at somewhere between 1 and 2% of FDI as a percentage of GDP. So we have to look at what, so if, we heard in previous conversation about the pie getting smaller. Well, is the pie getting smaller for foreign investment? It looks like, at least temporarily, it is in this current environment. And with COVID-19, of course, there's even extra pressures that investment promotion agencies have to deal with. And so what I'd like to focus on is on strategies for attracting investment in FDI. And much of the last discussion, again, I hate to say, but if I were a foreign investor, if the conversation is all around how much revenue can the government get, that's not going to be I guess, as attractive to foreign investors. What they want to hear is it's not necessarily that they're seeking, and you could please, refer to the report that I mentioned, the investment competitiveness report, because there's one very nice graphic there about, what is it, how important are certain factors in a parent company's decision to invest in a country, right? What are the key factors? And above all, political stability, macroeconomic stability, and legal and regulatory environment are the top three. And it's great to hear that, Hassan Saab, that you're working on the ease of doing business. That fits very much into the legal and regulatory environment. And that is what will bring investors in. And, below, and then talent and skills were next. And then you get to low taxes. And even market size is more important than low taxes. So just to highlight that it's not all about the tax regime. And I do applaud your efforts to try to rationalize the tax incentives for KP province, because A, it comes at a great cost, and B, it's not globally known as the key factor for choosing investment. Investors are much more likely to look at the potential of the location, profitability, potential. Tax rates will not matter if there's no profit, right? And there's no potential to make the investment worthwhile. So I encourage you all to look at the Global Investment Competitiveness Report.
Sure.
And I can send along the link to you, Hassan Saab, that you could share with everyone. My final point is about addressing COVID-19, and much of the last discussion was based on that. So our global teams work with investment promotion agencies in over 100 countries. And there was a survey of these IPAs in which 41 responded, basically to try to understand what are the measures that these investment promotion agencies are taking to counter the COVID impact on investors, and what can be done, because this is a unprecedented situation we're in, and there's no silver bullet. We all know that. Government's tried its best to make more finance available, but that's largely for domestic SMEs. They've been trying to streamline certain regulations, which is very helpful. But what else can IPAs do, who are not necessarily regulators, but are the ones who are, and that's the KP Board of Investment and Trade and the Federal Board of Investment of Pakistan and others. What can be done? And I think the most important responses came that were 4 points. One is that the successful IPAs continued working during COVID, right? And in many countries, they were in lockdown and didn't even, everyone worked from home, and they set up as much as possible using digital platforms. Now, I know working with Pakistan team is that we, many people have been reporting to the office, and I can see that Hassan Saab's there now, and I think Board of Investment was very, let's say, courageous that people were always in the office. So that's not a problem. But what maybe that could be done is around investor services. So now through the survey, what was, I guess, widely understood is that at least during the COVID-19 period, retaining the investors that are in the country is the number one point right now. Now, it's not likely that globally anywhere that investors will be making big decisions for the next several months on new locations, new investments, greenfield projects. But keeping investors in the current locations where they are has become a high priority for investment promotion agencies. So that means, and one of the more than 2/3 of the surveyed respondents mentioned that they were actively doing more to update investors on what was happening around COVID-19, what the country was doing, what measures were being taken. And, of course, that's public information, and we see a lot of newspaper articles, but it's hard for an investor to keep track of all that. And so the investment promotion agencies were reaching out to investors through direct assistance, direct calls, basically, and giving them updates regularly, especially strategic investors. That's a form of marketing. And over half of the surveyed agencies did this. They basically made up a list of all their key investors, and they started calling them, telling them what's happening, try to find out more about the issues, things that they're facing, and to provide assistance to help solve individual investor issues. Countries that have done that in the region, Saudi Arabia was famous for doing this, South Africa, Tunisia, several others. I think that reaching out to investors, talking to them, showing you care, and that goes a long way in memories of the investor in terms of support. Even if the IPA doesn't have all the answers, cannot solve all the questions and issues, just trying is worth a lot. And I think that was a common message that came out. Finally, a fourth area was around advocacy services. And this, I hear this happening with Hassan Saab. You've been talking about regulatory reforms, deregulation. And that is, again, what the advocacy role that IPAs can play, because you're not doing much of the regulation yourself, but it's other agencies that are doing that. But you're the gateway in terms of the private investors, raising issues and discussing them. And you're kind of a, I guess, honest broker in a way that you can play a role to advocate. So advocating for measures, emergency measures, policy reforms, and following up on these reforms, not just advocating once, but following up and pushing for these reforms is something that 2/3 of IPAs said that they were doing in this survey. So if we're talking about an FDI, and this is not just FDI, this is also large scale, larger scale domestic investment. There's many things that an IPA can do at this time that will have long-term benefits, because it will create trust and an environment of collaboration with the investment community. And I really highly recommend, setting up a mechanism for doing that, and a mechanism for keeping track of these conversations and following up with them. So I think that's the main the point I would like to make, that we are in a tough time, long term, not just in these last 4 to 6 months, but FDI is becoming more competitive. And we first need to make sure that we keep the investment we have, and then make our best efforts to promote the endowments of the KP province, and to proactively reach out to potential investors to come and have a look, and keep reminding people that the situation in the long term has been improving significantly in the province in many ways. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and look forward to further collaboration as we continue to develop the investment promotion strategy for KP province. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm happy to state there are a few questions related to your speak, but I'll refer those questions to some of my other colleagues. But I would just like to highlight that as an IPA, it is a continuous battle to actually get through the deregulatory processes, and the focus of FBR and State Bank is almost the opposite to what an IPA has to do and is supposed to do. And for us, priority remains the export sector, the import substitution, the employment generation, bringing new technologies. For them, it is always about revenue. So we are living on that thin rope, and perhaps with continuous interaction and debate and forums like these, we would find better solutions to some of the contemporary issues. There are several questions on the newly merged district, and I would request Mr. Amir Goraya to take on from here, and because UNDP has done extensive work as far as newly merged district and the investment climate in those areas which are now part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Huge potential, large landmass, beautiful tourist sites, hardworking human resource, border zones with Afghanistan. With all that potential, perhaps we still need to work more on some of the areas, and I would request Mr. Amir Goraya to speak on those and educate us all, and we would take And you could also look at the chat zone, and there are a few questions about newly merged district in terms of access to finance, and also in terms of connectivity, especially digital connectivity, where e-commerce and in some of the areas we're still lacking the internet facility. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Hassan Bhatt Saab. The other colleagues, thanks to KP government also. Also, Mr. Charles, private sector specialist from the World Bank, Dr. Wakar from STPI, and Mr. Sajid Aslam, head of ACCA Pakistan, the colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for this opportunity to talk a little bit about the newly merged districts, UNDP, and what UNDP is trying to do and what UNDP is planning to do. UNDP has two large initiatives with the government of KP, which directly work on the merged districts. One is the Merged Areas Governance Program, and the other is the Stabilization and Development Program, the SDP program. So both these programs has been one of the most active initiatives in the merged districts, and they've been kindly supported in the past by USAID, by UK, and also by the governments of Japan and other development partners. So UNDP takes pride in the fact that we've been engaged in the merged districts when it was FATA, and we, keep on engaging with them, also in terms of in terms of livelihood, and also for rule of law and other initiatives. I'm very thankful to the KP Board of Investment and Trade and Government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for inviting us to participate in today's discussion related to investment opportunities for Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the post-COVID scenario. It is indeed a great opportunity for all of us to get an overview of post-COVID investment climate in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and also to see that the way the Honorable Minister had said that how we all get used to or actually contribute towards the new normal which we are looking at. If you look at it, the COVID-19 probably has been the greatest challenge to the whole world after, the war, the Second World War in the 1940s. And I would say that this is much more than a health crisis, and it has the potential to create a devastating social, economic, and potential crisis that will leave a deep impact for the times to come. And I just quote, one of our colleagues, in one of the discussions with the private sector, they said that, when they are talking to the government is also pushed for the resources, and it look towards the private sector to contribute, and the private sector is actually equally, in trouble in terms of deteriorating businesses. So we, all of us, find ourselves in a situation which is going to last for a while, and which we all have to, witness and contribute towards, rectifying that situation. We are already witnessing severe repercussions on the provincial, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provincial economic situation in particular, and NMDs being, one of the most underdeveloped part. Having said this, I think there are opportunities as well, which we can tap into, such as producing and buying locally manufactured products, and opening of new business ideas as the usage of technology and online tools and applications. There's a lot to be done, I think, getting used to the new normal. In the changing world, we also need to adapt to new circumstances and do the necessary transition from conventional business approach to the digital space. This is something which I think is important for all of us, that, from changing to the transition, managing the transition, because I would say we are already not in the new normal, but we're already in transition. So managing this transition is extremely important for all of us. UNDP has been working in the merged district since 2015. And through the assistance of, the other bilateral donors from our development partners, the investment has been more than $63 million for the development of merged districts and improving the socio-economic condition of the communities in the newly merged districts. The future of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is dependent harnessing the potential of its youth bulge. So I think one of the key dividends which we need to capitalize overall in Pakistan and specifically in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is the young population. We have provided technical and vocational skills development training along with the incubation, sport and business development grants to more than 6,000 individuals in different trades, mostly from the newly merged districts. These one of the important things I would like to mention here, and also, just to park with the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also is providing a response to, contain the impact of the COVID-19, and we have an overall socio-economic support to the COVID-19 response. We are technically leading the UN's socio-economic response globally and in Pakistan to help state governments in setting the path for the acceleration beyond recovery towards 2030, making choices and actually managing complexity and uncertainty in 4 main areas. So the socio-economic framework which we have developed, has been appreciated, and that's good news for the UN in Pakistan, that the other countries, the UN in other countries is following that framework in 4 main areas. One is governance, second is social protection, the third is green economy, and the fourth is digital, transformation. So UNDP, in coordination with the Planning Commission of Pakistan, conducted the socio-economic assessment and response plan to help the government of Pakistan to strategize its response towards COVID-19. At the federal level, UNDP is supporting the National Disaster Management Authority, the Ministry of Health. At the provincial level, we are supporting the provincial head departments of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan, and we are working, to formalize some support mechanism with the health department in Punjab as well. And which means that we are also providing technical assistance in terms of human resource to these partner institutions. Then we have provided technological support to various government departments in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, planning and development, Sameda, for their connectivity, for the digital connectivity. Through funding, from USAID and Japan, we are implementing an economic growth project in Khyber, North Waziristan, South Waziristan, Orakzai, and Kurum districts of NMDs, which is also helping beneficiaries to cope with COVID-19 economic challenges. Our Stabilization and Development Program, SDP, has also initiated Cash for Work project through rehabilitation of small schemes. This initiative is a part of, rapid response for COVID-19 project for immediate temporary employment opportunities for the affected population in, specifically in the suburbs of Peshawar. So basically, I think one point before I conclude, I would like to reiterate is that the point from the Minister for Finance on the development partners trying to pace themselves in a way where we can deliver quickly, well taken. And I think, we will all try to work towards that. So I thank you all for a very useful discussion. Special thanks to Mr. Hassan Daud Butt, the Chief Executive Officer for KP Board of Investment, for organizing this webinar. I hope the recommendations are finalized through this discussion will help the government and private sector to increase trade and investment in NMDs and other parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. I thank you all very much. Thank you. And
wonderful. I think some of the interventions that UNDP is taking are actually bringing in the right kind of change. I would also request you that through your, able organization, you could convince the government to bring in, and since you've spoken about digital connectivity and bringing in the new normal, I would request that you highlight provision of internet services to newly merged district areas. Perhaps it's the time that we look at development first, and then perhaps tailor that with the security imperatives that we have. I would also submit that now you have a partner in the form of KP Board of Investment, which is keen to support all donor activity. We are now the focal point for all donors, and this was decided in the high-level dialogue. We would request UNDP, even in the constraints that we have, that we find smart solutions to the problems, and we will be your gateway and your connection to not just the the local government bureaucracy, but also the political and the business community. So thank you very much, sir. I would now request Dr. Waqar to speak a bit about SDPI's support to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Also, there are a few questions, and I would like you to address those in terms of tourism, because I know you had one tourism-related seminar just recently, then how Pakistan in the COVID scenario could work to improve its tourism sector. What should we do now, and what should we plan for the future, and those actionable plans. Also, after you would be Hassan Khyber, and I would leave one question with Hassan is about e-commerce, and we will discuss this when after Dr. Waqar, is about how we can improve our overall e-commerce facility, trade activities, and also since there is no, the government is crafting its e-commerce policy, but in this time and the lag that we have, how could we, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, especially women participation, could be improved? There was a question from Ms. Aruj about this, so I would leave that for Khyber. And for Sajid Saab, I know that you been a kind supporter of the mines and mineral sector development. The environmental concerns have come out as the FAQ in this, and I would leave that for you. And lastly, there are several questions that I have for LV and Mr. Ali about Rashakai. What is the cost of land? What is the development plans? And how would the environment impact assessment has been done? So first of all, I would request my friend and also our supporter through the and also our supporter through SDPI, Dr. Waqar, to please, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Hassan Saab. I congratulate you on a very, I think, a timely initiative, and really appreciate you bringing the minister along as well. I think his keynote was very insightful and set the right tone. You've rightly said that we were involved with KP-BOIT, inviting some response from the tourism sector and how to sort of do that minimum possible, which is a sort of immediate need of the hour to help this sector. While many of the sectors have opened up, we're looking at construction, many of the other 40 allied industries on the back of construction have opened up. But given the fear in potential tourism sector is taking a bit longer to, of course, open up. And there were, of course, two main things, which were the need to enforce the right kind of SOPs in the hotel and hospitality industry, but also the challenge that how would these SOPs be implemented in the large informal sector within which the tourism sector resides. And it was important that whatever tax break or whatever assistance by central bank is provided to these enterprises, it may be for a relatively longer duration as compared to the other sectors of the economy. But I also wanted to bring in here this enterprise level survey, which SDPI had conducted along with your colleagues at KP-BOIT. You were, of course, kind to advise as well, Hassan Saab. And I think there were 3 or 4 main challenges which these enterprises had pinpointed. And of course, tourism was certainly one of the sectors which we had picked up in the sample. The first one, of course, was that these firms going forward, at least until the 2nd and 3rd quarter of this fiscal year, would require certainty in their tax code. So last year, we saw the tax code change thrice. So this is a very strong request which we have submitted to FBR to help not just the tourism sector, but also the nano, micro, small enterprises across the KP province and the newly merged districts. Now, we also understand that this fragmented tax system is something where federal government as well as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Revenue Authority have signed an MOU, and we will really request the government of KP to take a leadership in following up on the formation of National Tax Council, which is supposed to address this fragmentation across taxes, of which the Minister Sahab also talked about. I think the other thing was around the uncertainty of investment incentives. While some of the incentives are available from the federal government, within the federal government, some incentives reside with FBR, some with the central bank, but then there are incentives at the provincial level. So province wants to go through out of the way in incentivizing investors, but if investment laws at the federal level change, that sort of neutralizes the effort of the provinces. So I think the second key advice which should go from your forum is that federal government and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government would need to work together to align the investment policy with investment laws. Currently, the country's investment laws are at variance from whatever policy would be in place. An example is the foreign exchange manual of the central bank, for example. I think PRMI, you are a great proponent, Hassan Saab, of Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative. I think this is again where the provincial government should take some leadership and quickly move towards implementing those 2 or 3 main recommendations of PRMI, which can benefit the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province as well as the newly merged districts going forward. The third point which our survey pointed out was the certainty of utility rates, particularly around electricity and gas rates, and the fact that these should be at least locked for the medium term, so there is cash flow predictability for the small and medium enterprises. And not only that, even the foreign investors who may be keen to invest, for their predictability of cash flow, they would like to see some certainty of the power and gas rates. Now, this is where government's cushion has to come in. And we have proposed that the circular debt plan, which the federal government has prepared, whatever subsidy, cross subsidy is saved out of that plan, that should go towards such initiatives, which is to lock the utility rates in provinces which require the most investment certainty. We also see in our survey that many of the firms whose sustainability is linked with Afghanistan-Pakistan bilateral trade, as well as the transit trade, and many of the new enterprises who want to invest in this area, they would like to see a more coherent Afghanistan policy. Now, I believe one of the areas where KP-BOIT can sort of push and recommend is the early finalization of Afghanistan-Pakistan transit trade agreement, which is due for revision this year. And second, of course, I think government of KP has been very instrumental in also making efforts towards the revised draft of preferential trade agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We believe that early signing of PTA between the two countries could give rise to new investment value chains, not just between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also way beyond to Central Asia as well. And there is a standing request by Kyrgyz Republic, as well as the Ministry of Commerce in Dushanbe, to access the Gwadar port. So this is where I think the gains from CPEC would also be leveraged. Now, for the border community, I believe that it'll be very timely if KP-BOIT can look into this, that we do understand that the demand is there from Afghanistan side, but a lot of homework has to be done. While the government has committed that 11 new border points would be opened up with Afghanistan, there is a case for border hearts. So for those communities who may not be able to take part in formal trade, it'll be best to bring them, to make them part of these border heart projects, which we are now seeing in case of trade with Iran. So government of Iran and Pakistan are now talking about this border heart initiative for the border communities. And we believe that it'll be important to take forward this advice as well. I think my last two suggestions would be around data and evidence. So one of the things which, for example, potential investors, or the survey that we conduct of potential investors, they ask us is around provincial GDP. sectoral growth of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's various sectors, district growth rates within KP. And it's not just specific to KP, it's also about other provinces. So the fact that our statistical agencies haven't yet risen up to this challenge, and we don't have quarterly GDPs coming up, quarterly job rates coming up. These are the 2 or 3 key indicators which investors would like to see. So in terms of producing this high frequency data, particularly in a post-COVID environment, will be very essential. And finally, I think, Hassan Saab, where we'll require your personal interest and leadership is to sort of persuade the Competition Commission of Pakistan to do a Khyber Pakhtunkhwa-wide regulatory impact assessment. The last RIA which was done, a regulatory impact assessment which was done for KP, was in 2005. So it's long dated. So any rationalization of regulatory burden which has to be done for KP or for any select sectors of KP, which Minister Saab and yourself also referred to, that should be based on the evidence that comes out of that rapid regulatory impact assessment, which I believe that CCP has the capacity to do really quickly. So thank you once again for this opportunity, Hassan Saab. I hope that these were some useful suggestions.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Wonderful recommendations. You know, we are also the focal point just recently made for the Afghan-Pakistan trade issues. And since last 1 month that we've been doing this, and I can see Adnan Saab also here, we've been trying, along with our chambers, trying to push that. I've had several meetings at Ministry of Commerce. We have given our comprehensive input as far as the border bazaars are concerned, so that they just not become small points of trade, but also become tourist sites like perhaps Wagah border is there. I would now request Hassan Khyber to speak about some of the issues that have been highlighted, especially with respect to environment and also in terms of deregulation. I am also happy to report that Hassan is working with the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa through DFID on the C project. He's the team lead on that. And we've had several sessions and extensive discussion. And I would just like Hassan to say about his initial assessment of our working processes and also recommend us the way forward in terms of attracting more investment. Hassan.
Thank you so much, Hassan Saab. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here on this webinar. And I am extremely happy to see these kind of webinars being arranged by your organization, by government of KP. And I think with someone like you there who has worked also on CPEC very closely, I think that's a great opportunity for KP also to make use of your skills and bring that angle into play. As Hassan Saab said, everyone, so I am also heading this program, which DFID is funding in KP. And of course, we'll be trying not to disappoint government of KP because Minister Saab said that, said something about development partners. And I have to agree with that because generally most of us are also bureaucracies. And when bureaucracies meet bureaucracies, it can be a very frustrating experience. You can trust me on that. But I think going forward, I want to touch upon some of the things that Taimur Jhagra Saab highlighted. And I think the first one is the investment policy. And because he mentioned investment policy quite a few times, and generally, I think it's a good idea to have sub-national investment policies where the provincial governments lay out their investment agenda. But I also do want to highlight that in the post-COVID world, the governments will have no money. And generally, in Pakistan in general, our focus in investment policy has been to offer a lot of carrots and expensive incentives to the industries and to the investors. And I think going forward, that luxury is going to shrink. We would not have that much money to spend. And I think the focus would move from offering carrots to regulatory reforms, to making it easier to invest in KP and to create a differentiation. We must also realize that the problem KP generally was always facing problems when compared with Punjab or Sindh because of various reasons. But now in the post-COVID scenario, the competition to attract FDI investment is going to be even more intense. Does that mean that it can't happen? No, but I do think that it means that we would have to put in double the effort to make that happen. And I do think that while regulatory reforms across the board are important, I do think that special economic zones provide an opportunity to at least resolve some of these issues in an island. And if you can make it work in an SEZ, I believe you can make it work across the province. So I think the SEZs like Rashakai, Hattar and others are going to be very important. And with KP-ISMEC and KP-BOIT, I do believe that SEED will also be able to help in that direction. The other one, the other comment by Finance Minister was an industrial policy. And I think industrial policies were in vogue many years ago, then they became out of fashion. And in recent years, they have increasingly become popular again because the world has realized that the governments do need to support the industrial landscape. Now, these policies could generally come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are called vertical policies or horizontal policies, or some of them are hybrid policies. But I think the real question is that do you want to create a level playing field and make it better for all sectors? Or are you going to invest in a few sectors or a few priority sectors? And I have a personal opinion on that. And I do think that COVID, although it's a big crisis, has also kind of provided some opportunities. And Hassan Saab mentioned e-commerce. I think the whole digital economy is one sector that has greatly benefited from that. Now, rather than going into other comments, I would like to address these two areas, e-commerce and women participation. On e-commerce, I do believe that if government of KP is going to revise and finalize industrial policy, I think that's a good enough place to focus on e-commerce. And I think there is a substantial room to help. And the help should come both at the demand side and supply side. So let me explain a little bit. Generally, there are a number of problems at the side of consumers where the government can help. And I think the first and foremost reason is, and I'm talking about people who are digitally quite abreast, I think the key problem is to protect the consumers from fraud. And I think that is one area where the governments can really help, to give that comfort to the consumers that they can move on to e-commerce and there are speedy resolutions if there is a problem. So I think that is one area where the government can support. The second area on the demand side is, of course, the digital, working on the digital divide, working on the areas where the connectivity is less, maybe working with telcos, working with organizations like Universal Service Fund to make sure that high-speed services are available across the province. And I think there is also merit in working on the supply side, which means working on the enterprise development level with large businesses, helping them, offering them incentives, offering them tax rebates and other things for them to convert to e-commerce channels. And I think this crisis is going to help because people are increasingly moving on to these channels. I think a good way to do that could be if government of KP could work on an e-commerce framework or e-commerce package, both for demand side and supply side, which could possibly find some spot in the industrial policy. And again, I think if the government of KP decides to do that, SEED program through DFID support would be very, very happy to help in that. Lastly, I think on women participation, I am a big proponent of women participation because if you look at Pakistan's labor force participation, there's a huge difference between women and men labor force participation. And if we can bring women at par in terms of their labor force participation with men, Pakistan's GDP would be equivalent to that of Vietnam and others. And I'm talking about GDP per capita. So that's the difference. That's the game changer. If we can make sure that women are part of the labor force, then that's the thing. Now, how can we do that? I think it's going to be a long journey. There are some proven models. Generally, other provinces have worked on areas like providing safe working places for women, women incubators and other things, women business centers. I think that's a good idea. And that's not only a developing country idea. I remember the last time when I went to Dubai, there was a whole line of pink taxis with women driving in countries like Dubai. I think even Saudi Arabia is moving ahead on that front. So I do think we need to kind of get out of the mindset and make that happen. But other than that, also, I think a lot of regulatory ease could also happen, because generally, if you look at some of the studies, women led businesses actually are more impacted by stringent regulations. They have to spend increased amount as compared to men on corruption, on rent seeking, on getting their businesses run, because they are seen as more vulnerable business owners. And I think there is, when we talk about regulatory ease, we especially have to see whether we are making it easier for women. But I am very hopeful, because Minister Saab talked about the budget. And I do think that this year's budget has talked a lot about reform. They have talked about, government of KP has talked about tax simplification. They have talked about compliance, and with organizations like KP-BOIT, with KP-ISMEC and all the others, I do believe that if we work together hard enough, we inshallah would be able to make a difference. And with that, thank you so much, Hasan Saab. And it's such a pleasure to be on this seminar with the esteemed list of speakers and guests. Thank you.
San, thank you so much. And amongst all the recommendations that you've given, I think your recommendations about women empowerment and their participation, and on the e-commerce package, I think we would incorporate them. I also have our Secretary Industries, Mr. Amir Latif here. He's a graduate of public policy from Australian National University, and he's a big proponent of e-commerce strategy, and he's asked me to work with him on that. And we have shortlisted our team of young entrepreneurs who would actually, navigate us through all this. So thank you very much. I would now request Secretary Industries, Mr. Amir Latif, to just educate us all about your plans, because the minister initially spoke about some of the key areas where he would like to work, including tax reform, ease of doing business, and speed of doing things within the e-governance and improving governance structure in KP. I would just request you to give your vision about, because you were the leader in crafting the new industrial policy and as well as the trade and investment strategy. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Could you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Am I audible? Okay,
Loud
thank you. First of all, I apologize for being late. There were a number of reasons for that. I won't talk about these. I'm sure that the presence of Minister Finance and other participants from KP government side would have sufficiently enlightened the other participants about why we are holding this webinar. Just a few quick words about e-commerce. I will start with what we have done about e-commerce. We have already notified a provincial e-commerce council, which is being chaired by a person no less than the Chief Secretary himself. Secretary Industry will be the secretary of that e-commerce council, and actually it is the federal government's initiative, and as a part of that initiative, provinces are required to notify their e-commerce councils, and we have done that. We have tried to select best brains involved in e-commerce here at Peshawar and in other parts of the province. They are with us from private sector. So I hope that very soon this e-commerce council will show results. One other thing is that the basic thing that I want to inform this forum about is that there is a strategic shift in the thinking of provincial government here in KP. And that shift is that we have, like during past 1.5 years, realized that it's actually the private sector, and within private sector, industrial sector, that is the driver of growth, economic growth. Believe me, the industries department was there earlier. Its attached formations were there earlier, no doubt. But the kind of vigorousness, the kind of vigor or the energy which now exists wasn't there. I believe that this shift is going to be the game changer, and this will drive our different programs with optimum energy. I was like for past 10 years, 10 minutes, I've been hearing to what has been discussed. I'm sure that by now the participants know about the upcoming industrial policy, its key features. We will definitely incorporate the suggestions which we have received here. And we'll try to further refine, although we have held a number of sessions with different stakeholders on this industrial policy. And similarly, the trade strategy again is actually our contribution to the overall national commerce and trade strategy, but we have been asked to develop our own trade strategy. That strategy is in final stages. Very soon it will be communicated to the federal government. About industrialization, the participants might now be knowing about the upcoming Rashakai SEZ, but apart from Rashakai, we have a number of other key economic zones which are coming up, and these are at Jalozai, which is a very old project, but inshallah it will be inaugurated by the Chief Minister on 15 July. I have just received his confirmation. And after Jalozai, we are focusing on Chitral, on Daraband at Dera Ismail Khan, and Ghazi. These are our other three important economic zones which were lying unattended, I should say. And in the coming 6 to 8 months period, we are going to commercially launch these other three, in addition to which is now which will be launched on 15th, commercially launched on 15th of July. So you see, all this is happening because of that strategic shift in the thinking of the collective thinking of the provincial government. This is one indicator. And we hope that these initiatives will create a sort of pull factor for investment, pull factor for skilled manpower, which is available around us but is lying unutilized. And this SEZ thing, yes, this will keep going on. For example, after Rashakai, we are now focusing on Mohammed industrial Mohammed economic zones, which we have actually inherited from Fata Development Authority. It is located close to Peshawar, right across River Kabul, on the bank of River Kabul in Mohammed district, which was once Mohammed agency. We have we are trying to include it into our CPEC initiative, make it part of CPEC initiatives. We are trying to convince Chinese to develop a training facility for us there and a value addition center at Mohammed. Similarly, yes, and to supplement the industrial sector, we are also invigorating our Tibet programs, so that tomorrow, when demand is created for skilled manpower, we should have sufficient supply of skilled manpower. For this purpose, we have KEFTA, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Technical and Vocational Training Authority. In addition to that, we are also in the process of establishing a skill development company, That will be a Section 42 company, which will focus on promoting big ticket items like construction, machinery trainings, and high-tech trainings, which are usually not imparted in our existing training institutes. A brief resume of what we have in mind, and I'll sit with Hassan later on because I'm not privy to what has been discussed in detail here. I'll sit with him and would like to know about him the suggestions which our participants here have given us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. As I just said earlier, we would be taking all these recommendations and would submit to you and through you to the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa about all the policy recommendations, about some of the projects that have been highlighted earlier, and some of the interventions that the government can take in order to fast track industrialization and trade and commerce and cross-border commerce. I would now like to invite Mr. LV to speak about Rashakai project. This is our watershed project. And I think with this project, there would be transformation effect. And after him, I would request Sajid, because he's been working with youth through the platform of ACCA, to speak about how we can, bring in fast change in terms of building the capacity of our human resource to embrace new technologies and, the industrial revolution of 4.0. And lastly would be Dr. Ali, who would speak about the plans of KP-BOIT in terms of what the secretary just highlighted. So LV, it's your turn, sir. And I'm highly grateful to all my friends who've been patient so far, but I think they've heard some good recommendations thus far. So Mr. LV, yes.
Hello, good afternoon, my Pakistan Chinese friend. Can you hear me, Mr. Dawood?
Yes, sir. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Very well.
Okay, long time no see. How are you, sir? Okay, my name is Alawi, and I come from Pakistan, CRBC Pakistan office. I'm a deputy general manager. And thanks, Mr. Dawood, to give me the opportunity to introduce our project here. And as you know, this Rajaka ICD is the first CPEC ICD project. So that's very important for us. And our Chinese embassy, Minister, said many times in some meetings, now CPEC moved to the new phase. What's that mean? That means CPEC will focus on industry cooperation and the social development project. And for Rajkai project, our CRBC already finished some GV and CA agreement with KP government. And now we almost finalized the developer agreement. And also we already finished our detailed design, and we will, after we sign the developer agreement with KP government, we will start construction recently. But for this project, construction is very easy for us because CRBC and the CCCC is the biggest infrastructure companies overseas in China. But the most important and most challenge for us is the marketing. That means how to attract the international investors, and especially how to attract Chinese big company to invest here in our Rajkai ICZ is a very important and very challenging problem now we face. So for the marketing and incentives, we already share some ideas and some suggestions with KP-SMEC and KP government and the federal government, BOI. So for this project, marketing and incentive policy, let our marketing manager, Mr. Simon, to talk about our ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. This is Simon speaking. Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan Auda, give us this opportunity to introduce Rashikai, especially focused on its marketing marketing issues for Rashikai SEZ. So for Rashikai SEZ, because so many senior level such as the finance minister and secretary industry, and some other officer have already mentioned Rashikai SEZ many times. Just like our DGM has mentioned very clearly, for construction, for development, Rashikai SEZ will be very easy. But now the priority for us is to marketing Rashikai SEZ. Even the project has not been officially launched. For CRBC and our partner KP-SMEC, actually we have done a lot of work to do the pre-marketing process, and in Pakistan as well as in China, especially in Pakistan, we visited different chambers and different government departments and some major industrialists to introduce the Rashikai SEZ. Presently, we have already attract around 100 ROI from China and Pakistan who show their interest to invest in Rashikai SEZ. And very luckily, recently we just allocate, we can say pre-allocate one piece of land occupying 40 acres for one Chinese company who shows their sincere interest to Rashikai SEZ. And so now, we just want to highlight for Rashikai SEZ, this is SEZ according to the SEZ rules and SEZ Act in Pakistan. It can enjoy 10-year holiday for income tax and a one-time exemption on the all custom duty and taxes on import of plant and machinery. And this is also used for other SEZ in Pakistan. And meanwhile, just like Honorable Finance Minister has already mentioned, for KP government, you are also drafting the new industry policies and covers the electricity, transportation, loan subsidy, easy environment process, and others. We hope the KP government can implement these policies soon, which will be very grateful and encourage the investment. Is invested in KP as well as for Rashikai SEZ. So in addition, Rashikai SEZ is the first CPEC SEZ under the cooperation between China and Pakistan. So because for us, for Rashikai SEZ, there is one biggest advantage. That is through Rashikai SEZ, we can bridge Chinese company, Pakistan company, and as well as the other countries' companies to make the joint venture to invest in Rashikai SEZ. So, because how to attract these big industries to Pakistan? This is a major concern because we have already done some study all over the world for some industry zones or SEZ developed by Chinese company in the world. So the major concern, the key factor to decide its success is the government's issue one package of special incentives. So this is a key factor, sir. So considering the significance of Rashika SEZ to China as well as Pakistan government, and we CRBC have already dropped one proposal, one incentive proposal, and shared with the KP government and federal government, BOI, CPEC authority. Now they are considering it. They are studying. Hopefully, the more incentives, special incentives for Rashika SEZ can be issued, and we also hope the government KP can also pursue this process. And meanwhile, presently, for Rashika SEZ, its development will be developed very soon. We also hope KP government side can ensure the external facilities can be provided on time, and also to simplify the security process for the foreigners, for the investors who want to visit the site or invest in Rashika SEZ. So we hope, applying the modernized development and management method, and with the CRBC's strong capacity, plus our partner KP's MAC cooperation, and as well as KP government, their support, we are very confident Rashika SEZ will be developed as the flagship industry cooperation project under CPEC, as well as the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Before I move to Sajid, Simon, there are a few questions that I've received from some of the participants. First of them is about the environment impact assessment and the, how would you, limit your industrial process in a way that your zone becomes the model zone for others to emulate. A1. And the other question that I've received is regarding Chinese enterprise looking at Khyber Pakhtunkhwa as a stepping stone for business and trade opportunities in Afghanistan. So could you just address those two, please?
So we just want to say, for the number one question, maybe for the number one question, for Rashika SEZ, this will be developed by CRBC in collaboration with KP's MAC. So we will inside for the facility, we will provide a very high quality standard infrastructure, effluent treatment plant, 24-hour electricity, gas, water supply to the doorsteps, and also exclusive one-window service, foolproof security procedure. So actually, for Rashika SEZ, we will set one window service to directly connect with the KP government and the federal government. If any company or any investor they face this kind of issues, we can facilitate it that. And also just copy the Chinese model, because Chinese one window service, this is very high efficient. Yeah. And so
I think your one window service can be linked with the one window ease of doing business service at Board of Investment, so that we have a larger canvas.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. So for Afghanistan, would you say a few words before I move to Sajid Saab, who's been waiting patiently?
Yeah, sorry, sir. Yeah, definitely. I just forgot, to introduce the significance of Rashika SEZ. Why is Pakistan and the Chinese government, they support this project, Rashika SEZ? This its a location. It's a very strategic location. So very close to Afghanistan, just 160 kilometers, and around 700 kilometers to China. And in the future, if we develop Rashika because we are focusing on development Rashika SEZ as the industry clusters. So in the future, Rashika SEZ will be as a transition center. So from maybe some service, some goods from China to Pakistan, and then transported to Afghanistan, or Pakistan's cargo can directly use the Rashika SCZ to reflect, to transport, to impact the Rashika, to impact Afghanistan, and also. Because Afghanistan is also one big market. So if some investor, they can invest in Rashika SCZ, so there are some facilities, especially due to the short distance and other convenience between Pakhtunkhwa and Afghanistan. So they can they can use this advantage, this platform of Rashika SCZ to play a big role in Afghanistan as well as the Central Asian countries. And we are also, because I just forgot to mention one point, actually we also approached different embassies in Pakistan, and also including, because our partner KP-BOIT, they are also approaching the embassy of Afghanistan, or Consul General of Afghanistan. They also introduced to us even some Pakistani businessmen, they are also show interest in Rashika SCZ. Yes,
Brilliant, sir. So now I would request my friend, a great proponent of women empowerment, youth empowerment. He has been instrumental in taking ACCA to the level where it is. And I'm happy to report, Sajid, that I have 3 ACCA graduates in my office, and they're doing wonderful work for me in terms of, to what we are doing today, for example, and also, reaching out to some of the investors. So I would request you to, and I would leave you 2 questions that I have. One is regarding the export-led industries. How do you see them, improving with the dollar parity, and also the COVID scenario, the challenges that we have now in export led situation, and also secondly, because of your background about how we could, though State Bank announces and offers a lot of incentives and a lot of stimulus packages, sometimes access to those becomes a challenge. And I had a meeting today early morning with some female entrepreneurs, and they were highlighting issues regarding access to finance and some of the collateral that is demanded. And in one case, just to lighten up the mood, the lady said that I was asked about my husband's credentials. So she said that, why are you interested in my husband's credential once I have my own? So with this, I would request you to speak and highlight us, and also please do, because we have a good group of people listening and hearing, about what ACCA plans to do in terms of BRI and CPEC, because I know your research work was tremendous.
Thank you, Daud Sahab, and thank you very much. I think it's a great initiative to really originate this kind of conversation, which help everybody to understand KPK, and also help you and the government to get some of the feedback from there. I'll just start with from an investment environment perspective. I'll just go back to my very recent experience when ACCA was at World Economic Forum, and we were promoting Pakistan as one of our investment destination. We started with the different sectors: infrastructure, energy, oil, gas, and we pitched that. And even when we were talking about the CPAC and the projects under that, but we were not getting that kind of interest. As soon as I put the one thing on the table, that our 60% population is less than 30, and they are educated, trainable people, and that's where the interest started. And I think the one area which we have to understand, the part of the world we are, there is a certain demographic dividend. If you look at the Europe side or America side, or even going forward, I would say China side, you will be seeing a more aged population compared to the young population which is coming from Pakistan. So when we talk about the youth well, there is a big opportunity, which not only for us, but also for the world to provide that workforce. Now I bring it to the recent research we did, particularly for KPK, and we have identified 11 key areas as an investment opportunity. IT is one, hydropower, mineral, education, energy and power, infrastructure, housing, oil and gas, tourism, agriculture, and transport. So these were the 11 sectors which we identified, and one single strength which we picked up when you look at the SWOT analysis in our report, that start with the human capital. I'll not get into the entire opportunities. I'll just pick a couple of those, and then we will come to the certain recommendation. I think there are two items which were discussed earlier, and they are very, very pertinent for investment promotion. The one is the data and statistical analysis of the sectors. Other is the women empowerment. Just to give you some evidence, which we have seen as a ACCA around the world, there are very young girls from KPK region who are basically attaining the global position in ACCA. So we are seeing people coming from Fata, Pata, and the remotest area, very young girl, and they have achieved the global prize winners. That's mean they are not competing with KPK, they are not competing with Pakistan, they are competing with the global student base, and they are still winning those global prizes. And that's a very proud moment for us when we represent those, when we go on those forums and we say these people are coming from Pakistan, and especially young women. When we are talking about the export, and now I'll just pick up on the IT or IT enabled services. I think the government can do a lot on the different area, but there are some areas where we just have to give a little bit nudge to people. KPK as an attitude and as behavior, they are by default and by nature, they are very, very entrepreneurial. And this is where we can leverage, we can mobilize, and that's we have seen, and we are trying to get that in the volumes. We have identified one of a key opportunity within KPK, that the women and the younger women who are sitting at home and they are educated, just give them a nudge that they can go online and they can start working on the export of services, whether it's finance, whether it's IT, whether it's a content writing, and they are very, very good. It's just that they need a certain nudge, a certain guidance, and a certain campaign that how to do it. It takes a certain level of patience. In 3 to 6 months, they can develop a good kind of flair around how to do it. And from an investment perspective, if I put together that in KPK, that's X number of young female available at home, equipped with IT or infrastructure or with the telephone and the internet, there are a lot of companies around the world, and I'll come back why I'm so confident around it, who want to deploy that at their workforce. Not only because they are good, also because everybody want to invest in the certain area which help to create certain social impact. And I think that's one area where the government just have to highlight and give a little bit nudge from education institute, from a promotion side of it, over the social media, and we can start mobilizing those women workforce and start bringing them in a main economic development of KPK. So that's one area where we can use the export of services as an area. We don't need an infrastructure, we don't need the big offices, but we need internet and the stability of the internet to run that one. And believe me, Pakistan still house the best architecture, best accountant, lawyers as well. And these young people, they have got their own kind of skill which they develop over the YouTube or Coursera or other mediums which are available, including the online courses which are available with ACCA. So that's one opportunity I would pick up. The second opportunity, which is very close to my heart, is the mineral side of it. We are still, I'll just pick up one sector of the mineral, that's the gemstones. And we are still exporting those gemstones in a raw form, and those, once it's go to the market, in an international market, the people who are finishing those or doing the cutting and everything, they are making a good money around those value addition. And those are our resources which are very much available. And with the CPAC and with the BRI, we are very much connected with all those markets. And we are also connected with China, who is the major manufacturer of those jewelries in bulk, which is providing to the world. So we just have to bring those industries close to that area so we can do that finishing and cutting, and then either in form of jewelry or at least in finished form of gem, we can start exporting to our partners in China or other part of the world, I would say. And again, that does not require a lot of government support. That's require, again, a little bit nudge and the basic infrastructure which should be available. People can see that opportunity. Right now, KPK is less than 10% of the Pakistan GDP. And it's not because they are not opportunity, because those opportunities are not converted into the value-added services, or we are not doing the value addition within KPK. And most of the time it goes through the different route, it's traded and it goes out of Pakistan, and somebody do that value addition and make a good money. So even keeping everything in the same form, the way it is, with all the challenges we can talk about, just adding 2 or 3 value additions within those value chains, I think that will immediately take the KPK share of 10% to 15%, and definitely it will help us to grow our GDP. And both are the sectors which we talked about are the export led. Now I'll come to a couple of things, and that's more to do with the behavior and attitudes, which we have seen there. And again, like I mentioned, genetically, people in KPK, FATA, they are very, very enterprising. We just have to help them build the confidence. There are a lot of associations which exist out there which will help them to really channelize that. We talked about the e-commerce, we talked about IT-enabled services, transport in the entire Pakistan. The best expertise exists in KPK, and we are the biggest one there once it's come to Pakistan. And e-commerce is all about the logistic and the last mile delivery. Nobody can understand the transport and the mechanics of the transport better than somebody coming from the KPK. So that's a big facility. Even from an e-commerce perspective, the entire Pakistan is opening up right now. We can have we can talk about the challenges, but the people who are in an online business, they are doing online business, and that's growing, particularly within the COVID situation. And we talked about the IT-enabled services, we talked about the e-commerce. These both services are growing within the COVID scenario. And that's an opportunity which exists today. We don't have to go for the post-COVID scenario. We can do it right now. And again, from a behavior and attitude perspective and the knowledge-based perspective, that logistic and the transportation is, anybody who needs that talent, they will come to KPK either way. So why not leverage within KPK and start supplying? If not exporting, we can start supplying within Pakistan. And there are items which we can do there. We can talk about more opportunities, but I just want to close it with a certain recommendation. Number one, IT infrastructure and data. I think that's the 2 things which we as a government need to intervene, that the bandwidth and the information flow. I'm not talking about data as a capacity. I'm talking about the information like the sectoral analysis that should be focused. Number 2, I'll suggest that we should be holding investor conferences now. This COVID situation has definitely created an opportunity. Rather than we are talking right now, we can have a very sector specific online event where we can help you, even ACC, and I'm sure all other people can help you invite domestic as well as foreign investor to sit and listen and ask questions that if we are talking about the mineral sector, what does it mean? What is the size of the opportunity? What they need to do, who they need to connect. And at the same time, we can also mobilize the international one. Investment always start with the domestic investor. That's what we have seen in Indonesia. That's what we have seen in Turkey. That's what we have seen in Vietnam. And my last in 1 year when we have promoted Pakistan on a different sector, everybody says Pakistan is just a 10 or 12 year behind Indonesia, but with the better human resource. So when we will get on that bandwagon, our acceleration and the growth rate will be way higher. We just have to get those couple of fundamental things right. And KPK having the kind of leadership right now, I'm not talking about we should be looking at the 3 to 5 year ahead. We should be looking at the 6 months if we are looking to really leverage these scenarios. And we may have to move very, very fast. And I'm sure the private sector is the one which can help and move fast because they have got more incentive, they can earn more money, and they can overcome some of the constraints. So my recommendation, number one, mobilize those young girls, bring them on the in the economic activity. For that, they are very much ready. They just need a little bit confidence and nudge. IT infrastructure, bring the secretarial analysis around the different segments, and then definitely start holding the investor conferences. All credibility, confidence, and the branding is about the communication. Bring people there, tell them what the sectors are, let them pick up those conversations back in their boardroom, and make KPK and Pakistan relevant for their investment decision. So that's my humble submission, and if there's any question, I can pick up those.
Yeah, Sajid, thank you very much. First of all, there's a direct question before I go to earlier. There's a lot of financial uncertainty during COVID-19. So it is very challenging to convince investors. You've highlighted the fact about these investor conference, but in the question that Mr. Murtaza says, what's the best way to convince potential investor to invest big during these uncertain times? I would also request that I think institutions like ACCA, UNDP, DFID, and perhaps World Bank should, and us like BOI, should get together, craft good recommendations. I'm also working on this, archive center within BOIT, because we have done a lot of research work, which is now not available, perhaps are in drawers somewhere in different government offices. So we're setting up this archive center here through the help of perhaps, I can see Hasib here, I see Charles here, anyone who comes and steps forward to help me, even ACC. I would also request, before you go to answer that question, is that please be our ambassadors, each one of you, in promoting KPK and the potential it has.
No, so we will be honored.
To the question.
We are definitely honored. I think there are two pertinent areas which a journal myth. The first myth is that in an uncertain environment, people don't invest. History tells us everybody who has made a big money, that was under the uncertain environment, because that's where the maximum opportunity exists, and there are very few players. So definitely there are different appetite and profile of investor who get into the, different kind of environment. Definitely, if you look at the risk appetite of our bank, they will prefer to invest in a government security rather than lending it to a SME. So that's their risk profile. But if you look at the venture capital risk profile, I'm not saying that in Pakistan there are a lot. So they will be looking for a small opportunity, which is a very high risk, but they can see that it's become very sizable. So for us, the simple thing is that we are 220 million people. If we can't sell it to the rest of the world, 220 million people are good enough to really bring out those size of opportunity which can make that investment worthwhile. So there are uncertainty, but there are certain profile of investor who only invest in those kind of scenarios because they have got a different kind of skill set. So definitely, if you're talking to the domestic or international investor, whoever low risk appetite, they are not the one which should be our target right now. Number two, access to credit will always remain a challenge in Pakistan. Unfortunately, the way, regardless how progressive State Bank is, what kind of facility State Bank is providing right now, and I would really appreciate the way State Bank has really stepped in. But as soon as it's come to the commercial banks who have to actually execute that, I think they have to go through their own policies, and they are not doing that kind of facilitation which State Bank would otherwise expect, and they are not going for that high risk investment. But at the same time, if you look at FINCA, the microcredit banks, you look at Akhuwat, I think they are becoming a more enabler, and their risk appetite is different. Number three, even within our domestic environment, there are a lot of people who want to invest. They do not know where to do that, and they end up with the banking one. If we can create a small mechanism where we can bring that information up in a very credible way, and we can create those investable cases. There are people from a private sector who will be investing small amount, 4-5 lakh million rupees, 2 million, 5 million rupees, and they are okay with that risk appetite as long as we also include the social impact and not only the profitability of the investee alone. So if we can bring out that, so any project which has a social impact, these domestic and the private investor are willing to put their money there. But that's just a matter of connecting those people. And I think SMEDA, like the investment arm, like yourself, ACCA, we are all there to really connect those people. And that's what our primary role should be. There's a question which is saying the pool of investor may be squeezed, but definitely the size of investment which is available, that's still quite big. So over to you, Hassan sir. Hassan sir, you are on mute.
Yeah. So I would now request my co-host, Dr. Ali. He's been, I think, waiting anxiously, not just to promote the policy of KP-BOIT, but also his own ideas, because he's worked closely with some of the business leaders. He's been part of some of the policy work which is happening across Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. He's a young aspiring leader of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So I would request Ali, and I would also request you to answer one question which was not directly answered by Simon, was about the environment impact of all these SEZs, and how would you make them more environmentally efficient, and how would you also like doing your marketing to attract more investment? I know you would say that we would use Board of Investment to support you, but besides that, what's your overall take, and how do you see KP-BOIT say 5 years from now?
Thank you, Hassan Saab, for the commending words. So I'll start with a bit of backdrop regarding what has been already said about the financial uncertainty looming around due to the pandemic. So it goes without saying that COVID-19 has had devastating effects on human lives and the global economy. And we have witnessed significant economic contraction, and the global GDP, like the finance minister said, the predictions keep on changing. But the forecast for the year 2020 is minus 4.9%. The global trade is expected to fall anywhere between 13 to 32%, depending on the extent of the global economic downturn. And the pandemic has also, as we all know, has caused a disruption in global value chains and the global supply chains, due to which business continuity has become a big problem. And the number of reported insolvencies, they have also increased. But having said that, some businesses in certain sectors, they have showed more resiliency compared to other businesses in other sectors, and have shown a significant increase in their market cap amidst the pandemic. And I'll come to that in a minute. We need to be mindful that the economic hangover of pandemics, historically speaking, they tend to continue for a while, even after the pandemic ends. So post COVID-19, depending on the situation, we may ask if there is going to be a new normal. Many believe that there is going to be a new normal. So if yes, then how would it affect the investment climate and the investment priorities? And how do we adapt to the new realities and the next normal? And how do we plan accordingly? So I'll start with some of the good things now. So the global GDP forecast for 2021 is 5.4%, which indicates that post-COVID-19, economic restoration will lead to recovery in certain sectors of the economy. I've also had a look at some hiring related data on LinkedIn for some countries, which shows that countries where the situation has stabilized, they show an increasing trend in hiring, China being one of them, which is a good indication. And I also went through some data from the Financial Times regarding the top 100 companies that have gained during the pandemic. And some of the speakers, they mentioned e-commerce, and that's very true. The biggest gain has been observed in the technology sector, where the top 18 companies, they've added a total market cap of about 1.04 trillion US dollars. Microsoft being the biggest beneficiary in that list, that has added around $270 billion to their market capitalization, followed by Apple and then Tencent. E-commerce is the second biggest beneficiary, and the total added market cap has been 680 billion US dollars. And the top 10 companies, they include Amazon, which is the biggest beneficiary in that sector, which has added more than $400 billion to its overall market cap. Then the third sector that has gained significantly is pharmaceuticals, then followed by automobile, and then by online payment platforms. So there is tremendous potential in e-commerce. There is no doubt about it. It depends on us how we strategize and how we go about it. There has already been some very good suggestions by some of the speakers before me. So I think we can sit down and we can seriously mull over the possibilities that we can have in that sector. So like I said, the top 100 companies that have benefited from this COVID situation, collectively, they have added more than $3 trillion of market cap to their portfolio. So what do we have in store to attract investment and contribute to the economic growth? So like it was mentioned by Secretary Saab and by Finance Minister and by yourself also, we have developed a revised industrial policy in collaboration with KP-BOIT and other pertinent stakeholders, which is structured on 3 pillars. The first one is revival and rehabilitation, wherein we are going to focus on the sick and closed units and their revival. The second pillar is growth, in which we are going to focus on ease of doing business. KP-BOIT, you have led the cause really aggressively, and you have done a very good job. And obviously, in the future, we intend to build on that. Also, under the growth pillar, we intend to focus on SEZs, but general purpose SEZs, like in the case of Hatar, 4 to 4 acres, and also Rashakai, which is a general purpose SEZ. We also tend to focus on public-private partnerships. Like it was said before, the contribution of private sector is going to be, maybe I could say it's going to be a game changer. KP government is already working on revising the Public-Private Partnership Act to make it more friendly and to bring more clarity into it. They're also working on the public-private partnership rules. Hopefully that has already been finalized and it's going to be approved by the provincial cabinet soon. The third pillar is competitiveness, in which we are going to focus on our natural endowment. Also, we are going to focus on sector-specific SEZs based on district strengths. We already have a comprehensive document in which we have done the SWOT analysis of all the districts of KP, including the newly merged districts. Also, I've had a lot of conversations with some of the consultants who are working for the SEED project, and I've emphasized on the need to collaborate on undergoing a thorough sector-specific study, because while doing that, we can really focus on how we can capitalize on the strengths that we have in our natural endowment. We are also going to focus on industry-academia collaboration. We are already actively engaged with a few well-known public sector universities, and we are going we have already identified a very good project, and we are going ahead with it in the next few months. And industry-academia collaboration, it's also one of the big missing links in the overall innovation value chain, and we need to strengthen that throughout Pakistan, not just in KP. So during the pandemic, we have actively kept ourselves engaged with political investors, with potential investors and stakeholders. And as a result, we have had investments in our existing economic zones, while a lot of interest has been shown by investors in our upcoming projects. KP-BOIT, like you said, I have to say it, it has been really helpful regarding facilitating us in bringing new investors, and we have already launched a few marketing campaigns. We've also launched one of the projects that was also mentioned by Secretary Industries, which is Jalozai. Rashakai is already finalized with CRBC, like Simon and LV they explained. We just have to sign the agreements, and then we are going to move ahead with the development of Rashakai, which is a prioritized special economic zone under CPEC. After Jalozai, we intend to launch Ghazi. We intend to launch Chitral economic zone. We intend to launch Naushara extension. Also, Secretary Saab mentioned an economic zone in DI Khan in Daraban area. So that's in the south. And we also intend to do a thorough sector-specific study over there, because DI Khan also has certain strengths that we can capitalize on. And we also have Momand economic zone, which is in the newly merged districts. There is also a very important project taken up by the KP government in collaboration with the World Bank, which is the Khyber Pass economic corridor. And through that, we can facilitate trade with Central Asian countries and we can maybe have convenient access to their markets. So to sum up, actually, I would say that in such situations, it becomes challenging to handle aspects related to the political economy for the government and to strike the right balance between competing priorities and expectations. However, our political dispensation, I would say, has handled the situation aptly really well. And therefore, we being the entity expected to engender economic growth through industrialization and thereby create employment opportunities, we are very hopeful that despite of the challenges, we are and we will deliver as per our mandate for our province and our country. And regarding the question that you asked, it was related to the the environmental impact. So just like Simon said, perhaps Rashaka is going to be the first economic zone or special economic zone that would have a dedicated combined effluent treatment plant. I've also gone through the budget proposed by provincial government of Punjab, and they've also mentioned that they're going to allocate a sizable amount to establish 2 combined effluent treatment plants in 2 of their economic zones. But Rashakai perhaps is going to be the first special economic zone in the country that is going to have a dedicated combined effluent treatment plant, and that's going to significantly reduce the impact on the environment. Also, we have carried out the environmental impact assessment study of Rashakai. Public hearing has taken place. We've also received the NOC from EPA, and EPA was provided with all of the information regarding Rashakai and its possible environmental impact. So I think we are good to go regarding the environmental aspect of it. CRBC, in collaboration with CRBC, we are going to ensure that the impact on environment is kept at a minimum, the detrimental impact of industrialization.
Ali, Dr. Ali, we have a question from Mr. Murtaza to you, sir. That says that you mentioned about few key players around the globe who've done well, especially in pharmaceutical and other industries. And you also have given a good picture of post-2021 scenario where the business would pick up and there would be surge of activities, both in business and trade. But his question is that why none of the business from Pakistan has been unable to increase its net corporate wealth during COVID-19?
Okay, so like I said before, if you look at the sectors where the companies have gained during the COVID-19 situation, so the first sector that I said, the sector on top of the list is the technology sector, followed by e-commerce sector. So if you look at the players that we have in Pakistan in these sectors, they are not very big. And that's perhaps one of the reasons. And that's why some of the speakers before me, they mentioned that we need to do a lot to basically get a bigger share of the pie in these sectors, especially related to e-commerce. The federal government has already, they have approved an e-commerce policy that's already available. And I think if there are some very good priorities mentioned in that policy, and we also need to work on our own provincial e-commerce policy that's aligned with the federal government's policy. So a lot of work needs to be done. The third sector that has gained significantly is the pharmaceutical sector. And I would say that some of the companies in Pakistan, they may already have benefited a lot, especially when there was hype created around the effectiveness of chloroquine. So that also, helped their sales a lot. And also, there are a couple of companies that have received the license to manufacture remdesivir from a US company, which is also believed to be very effective in against COVID-19. So I think in pharmaceutical sector, companies in Pakistan may have benefited, not to an extent compared to the international players, but I think they have done quite well, reasonably well, I would say.
Thank you, Ali. And this brings us to the end of the session. It's been a marathon session, but I think equally rewarding. I couldn't have asked for more in an inaugural session. It's a new norm or a new normal for Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and we would have a series of similar interactions. Our next is for third week of July, where we will be discussing the tourism and services sector. But one of the questions that they were frequently asked is about our priority area. I think in no particular order, our priority is in tourism and services sector, also healthcare and pharmaceutical, and this all has now jumped up the ladder because of COVID-19. We also have infrastructure, and that infrastructure is perhaps in a PPP Act that Dr. Ali just referred to. I am part of that committee. We have crafted a very simpler PPP Act, and from there we'll go into the rules and regulations of that. And also mines and minerals, because of our natural endowment, we want to leverage that. We are setting up border bazaars with Afghanistan, and this would be a novel idea where the local community around those borders crossings would benefit. The other areas are hydel and renewable energy sector, and this is also one area where we have natural God gifted, because of our strategic location. There are a lot of sites, and we're linking our hydel sites with potential industrial zones to benefit, because our cost of energy nationally is higher than our competitors. But I would end with a positive two quotes of Deng Xiaoping, who I am a great follower of. One is that we will cross the river by touching the pebbles and by touching each stone step by step, phase by phase. Whether somebody likes it or not, whether somebody supports it or not, we in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have suffered because of security, and we cannot, thank God enough for what we are now and how we are taking it forward. And the other quote that I would like to refer of Deng Xiaoping, the great Deng Xiaoping again, is that it does not matter whether the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mice. So I am a big proponent of this policy, and I will follow that. Some argue that, whether we have the capacity. We do have the capacity. We have brilliant youth. I teach in some of public and private universities in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in my 10 months that I've joined Peshawar. And brilliant human resource, enterprising mind, all around. I think people in KP, the youngsters, have the knack. I wish I would have that. Otherwise, I would not be serving in public sector and would have been doing my own business. But I see youngsters from ACCA, youngsters in IM Sciences, Peshawar universities, really want to take that step. So I would request each one of you participants today, by way of thanking, is that please be our ambassadors. Please be the champion of positivity that is now in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We are the most politically stable province, and perhaps some political difference might argue with that. But trust me, coming from Islamabad and having served in public sector for so long, I'm enjoying each and every moment in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So be part of this drive. You've heard our minister. He's the most pragmatic minister we have. But he's not the only one. We have several who are at par with some of the best, who want to bring around change in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So be our partners, be our support. Come and invest in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. If you have friends who are potential investors across the globe, please tell them that there's a place called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and there's a building called KP-BOIT, and there's a person called Hassan who is there to provide the ease of doing business. We will do hand holding from airport, railway station, or bus stop, wherever you come as potential investor, and we will take you to the next level. We have great friends and colleagues in KP ASMEC, SIDB, KP TEFTA, and also you've heard our secretary. And in the next stage, we'll have our industries minister also. We are all getting ready. Support us, guide us, teach us And I think we have a final question again from Murtaza, who's been very keen in sending questions. Is no project has been finalized in terms of investment. I think this is a more KP-BOIT, and I'll answer this through a private chat. But there are several projects that we're working with FFC for a refinery. LOI has been received. We're working in the mining sector and phosphate in Aptabad. The LOI has been received. We're working in Gajuba for a transmission project closely since I've arrived. There are other, I saw Mr. Ma here, who wants to set up a state-of-the-art Chinese vocation center in Peshawar, and I'm the one who's asking him to first craft a good policy guideline. So there's a lot of interest in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We were hit hard by COVID, but we did not close a single day. But actually our work magnified because of being part of the task force on industries. So please be with us, and thank you so much. Till next time, third week of July on tourism and services sector. And also, if you have any recommendations in terms of speakers or ideas, do share with us, and we will respond. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz. Fi Amanillah.